Yeah, go on.
Remember I wanted to take the video of you gabbing your mouth off?
Anyway,
you can do that
So
anytime.
hang on, rewind a bit. So who said that everyone goes into West Hall dorm?
Dave Palmer.
Dave Palmer.
Dave Palmer took over in 61, I think, when BJ died.
Died, yeah.
And he was a businessman.
Yes.
Had he not been a businessman, the place would have gone downhill. BJ owed so much money.
Yeah.
So Dave got control when the old fella died, and he put it on a business basis. And so that's why they had to get that building, because it was obvious on the same block, and they had to make it pay, and that's why every single fella.
So they paid something.
Oh, you had the board there, you had to pay board, and that's how it all came. They were going to try and get to New York, and she had an old Chevy, an old 52 Chev. Well, that was a fairly older car then.
Yeah.
10,
11
anyway,
years.
Yeah, and anyway I said, well, okay, I might, I'll come with you. So I drove, and I drove.
You drove?
I drove the first day to within 100 miles of New York. What's 1,100 miles? 1,200 miles is it? I drove within 100 k's. We started off at 4 in the morning and finished at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And I drove nearly all the way. But anyway, we did this tour up into Canada and back and round about. And so that.
With Shirley.
With Shirley and
Winters.
Jay. And Jay.
Hang on, Shirley Winters' mum.
mother.
Gotcha.
Sheila.
Yep.
Sheila. And this Jay.
Sheila Connolly.
Who I think might have been her husband then. I'm
Right.
not sure when they married.
Not sure. But they did marry.
They did marry.
I think the John Connolly Award is still running at Palmer. So Connolly was the late husband of Shirley.
Sheila.
Oh, Sheila.
Sheila Connolly,
Right.
late husband of Sheila, the father of Shirley.
And he died during his studies.
Yes, and I assume that would have been around about, I wouldn't know, we were there 62, so I'd say probably about 1961, I'm thinking.
Right. Do we know what he died from?
I don't know.
No.
It was about, I think he was in his 40s or something.
Right.
Like that. It's a pretty high award. It's it's one of the better awards, I think.
And you were there in 62.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, 62 to 60 and to 65, September.
And Kelvin Brinsmead was in your class.
Yeah, Lois and Russell Clark, Lois's husband.
Yep, Lois, who died 6 months
Russell
ago.
died in 69, sadly.
Yeah.
Dynamic little bloke. He was one of those fellas that he wasn't a big noter, but he had an inner confidence that he could just do.
Yeah.
He was just one of those great fella.
Yeah.
Very talented.
And he died suddenly?
No, melanoma.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. He went down over 2 or 3 years. They took over a practice from Frank McLeod in. McLeod originally owned it, and it'll come to me the name. The fellow in Warrnambool, American, had taken it over. These were the days when the type likes of Stan Bolton and his father, and McLeod's in Victoria, ran multiple practices all over the place, and they really were, great proclaimers of the faith. They went out there. It
was like a road show, wasn't it? They travelled on the train.
Yeah, well, here they did. I suppose down there it was probably more by car.
Right.
But they'd be a day here and then a day there, and so on, and that's how McLeod came to Terang. In probably 1960-61. Now, Kelvin had a history. They've had a history of chiropractic way back before that. Their grandmother's house in Morwell was used by Tony Hart.
Right.
From Melbourne. And Tony used to come down, and perhaps even his father, I think, used to come to Morwell and practice in that house. And that's how Kelvin was
Inducted.
Indoctrinated.
Yes.
Yeah, and he always wanted to be a chiropractor. Even the first year I met him, I was teaching, and he was doing electrical work in the town, and he wanted to be a chiropractor. He said, you know, that would be my real dream. So then McLeod came to town, and it sort of renewed the fire. The old
So you were a
desire.
teacher. So
Yeah.
who swung you, Kelvin?
Well, yeah. Well, I went out. I went teaching, and that first year, that's when I met Kelvin in Terang, when McLeod came to town a couple of years later. Then I was teaching. They put me in high school. I was a primary, and they put me in high school, and we were qualified to teach. Up to year 9 or something like that. And so I realised at the end of it that I wasn't, the only way I was going to get anywhere was to have to do degree work, and I was never a student. I was never do it in part time. I couldn't handle that. So after 3 or 4 years, I'd been teaching, and it sort of things. I liked it. I liked the teaching side, but I couldn't see that I was going to go very far, as you want to, without a hell of a lot of work, and that wasn't me in that situation. So, and I had a few old chalkies that I finished up back at my Geelong High School where I'd been as a kid, and of course a lot of the old staff was still there.
You're kidding?
And
wow.
And then you get the wait till you've been around as long as I have, son. You won't be quite as keen. All that sort of stuff, and negative stuff. That sort of. I thought, I don't think I want to be around at 65. Just.
Yeah.
What? So Kelvin suggested it, and then when we put 2 and 2 together, it sort of all came together for me. And that's in McLeod. Lois was working as a part-time receptionist for McLeod. That's why she became interested. Russell could see what was happening. He became interested. Kelvin, of course, he was refired. He was fired up again. And Keith McDowell from he was in the air, and Keith got very enthusiastic. And then because I was on the tag too.
So was Keith, Donald's father, was local to you guys, was he? How did Keith?
Keith was farming in round Terang.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, so that's how that came to be. So there were 5 of us went away, and Kelvin took Heather and three under the age of 2.5, 1 plus twins. Keith went alone because he wasn't sure how he was going to cope. So he gave it 6 months. He was doing quite okay. So his wife brought the 6 kids over and took 7 back.
Ah.
And that's how that all came to.
So was Donald born over there, or?
Oh, no, Donald was about 10, 11.
He was already born here.
He was the eldest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
He
right.
was the eldest of the troop. Eldest of the 6.
He's still pretty old.
Well, you go back to 60. He's 71 or 2 perhaps now.
Yeah. He looks 49.
Stay 60. Well, he'd be 11 or 12. Probably.
Right.
Caught up with him a couple of years ago. Remember we went to Canberra?
Yeah.
And so you weren't married.
No.
And then you got back here and met this lady.
Yeah, a mate of mine I was very, very close to from the YMCA before I went away. And when I was practising in Swan.
So Beverly, you haven't been able to construct a divorce as yet,
I've had 1 divorce.
but not Dave.
No, well,
You learned from one and it's not worth it.
not worth it.
Yeah,
So Dave, you had this plane and used to go from practice to practice?
No, that was Jeff Airy and I bought that in retirement.
Oh, right.
That was our retirement.
But Jeff used to fly
Jeff
from
used to fly
practice.
he used to fly to
Parks?
Parks, yeah. No, from Parks
To
Cobar.
Cobar. Yeah.